Doubt is a natural part of the human experience. Postmodern philosophy has shown us that achieving absolute certainty is nearly impossible, and not just in matters of religious faith, but in all areas of life. A couple years ago, Em and I met with a financial advisor who convinced me to buy more life insurance. It's not much, so don't get any ideas. I'm fairly confident that I'm going to live for many more years, but a little bit of doubt motivated me to increase my policy, just in case. For her 30th birthday, Emma decided to go skydiving. Even though she knew it was statistically safe and that there is no way that I would do it with her, doubts began to creep in as she signed the liability waivers. And when her tandem instructor scooted them to the edge of the airplane door, everything inside of her said, "Don't do it." These are just a couple examples of how doubt is part of the human experience. Even in matters of faith, we may crave certainty, but what we get is divine mystery. Some religious people are so fearful of mystery and ambiguity that they join fundamentalist churches that claim certainty in their religious beliefs and teach that faith should banish all doubts. Out of fear of angering God or being ostracized by their community, they adamantly deny having any doubts, but those doubts persist, lurking in the background and manifesting in unhealthy ways. By treating doubt as an enemy of faith, they miss the reality that it's a natural and healthy part of the human experience. While doubt can certainly be uncomfortable, learning to tolerate that discomfort can reveal our illusions and guide us toward deeper truth. Many of us experience this process in our faith journey. As children, we hear Bible stories, and because our brains have not developed critical faculties, we take them at face value and simply understand them literally. But as we grow older and begin to study subjects like science, history, and literature, some of these literal interpretations are challenged, leading to doubt. And I believe that this is a good thing, because if we embrace doubt and allow ourselves a period of searching and uncertainty, our understanding of the Bible can grow and deepen. Viewing it through a different lens can enable us to integrate the broader knowledge that we've gained throughout life, leading to a richer and stronger faith. Isn't it fascinating that the person who made the strongest claim about Jesus in the entire Bible was the one who doubted the most? Thomas. You may remember the story. Jesus is arrested, crucified, and buried. Later, the women visit the tomb, returning with the astonishing news that God has raised Jesus from the dead. Thomas, however, is skeptical, and he declares, "I will not believe unless I see and touch the wounds in his hands and in his side." When Jesus appears to Thomas, he does not rebuke him for his doubt. Instead, he invites Thomas to see with his own eyes and touch with his own hands. Then Thomas proclaims, and I quote, "My Lord and my God." No one else in the Bible addresses Jesus as God with such clarity and conviction. And Thomas isn't the only one who doubted. Abraham questioned God's promise of a son in his old age. Jacob wrestled with God. Moses doubted his calling to lead the Israelites out of Egyptian slavery. King David wrote extensively about doubt in the Psalms. And Joseph, the earthly father of Jesus, doubted Mary's miraculous conception and was ready to divorce her. Peter faltered when Jesus walked to him on water, and other disciples, like Thomas, doubted the resurrection. The Bible is full of such stories showing that doubt does not have to destroy faith, because almost all of these people went on to be heroes of the faith, showing that doubt can actually deepen our relationship with God. So rather than denying our doubts, the new series that we start this morning will encourage us to confront and wrestle with them, trusting that God will remain with us and guide us toward a deeper and more intellectually honest faith. So today, we begin by addressing doubts in the existence of God. Has anybody here ever doubted the existence of God? I believe at some point, everyone questions whether there truly is an all-powerful, all-loving God that cares for us personally and also reigns over the entire universe. This is a natural part of faith because God is the ultimate mystery. We can't even understand, really, what a light year is and the extensiveness of our cosmos. And if we can't even understand parts of creation, how in the world are we going to fully understand the one who created it? God is the ultimate mystery. We cannot hear, see, or touch God as we do with one another. And even if we could, God's greatness is beyond the capacity of our minds to fully comprehend. So why do so many people believe in God? Throughout most of human history, the order, beauty, and vastness of creation have led people to conclude that there must be a creator. And this idea is beautifully captured in our scripture reading this morning, taken from Psalm chapter 19. It says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim his handiwork. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge." Still today, many people across the globe find compelling evidence for the existence of God by reflecting on the beauty of creation. There are times when I'm sitting in the ocean and early in the morning watching the sunrise, and I'm so stunned by the beauty and awesomeness of what I'm seeing that it causes me to spontaneously break out in praise of God. But that's not the case for everyone. As our knowledge of science has grown, other people have come to believe that we can explain everything in a naturalistic way, making God, in the words of Stephen Hawking, unnecessary. When reflecting on the origin of the universe, one reason why some people refuse to believe in God is because they misunderstand the creation stories in the book of Genesis. While these stories carry the wisdom of the ages and offer profound truths about God, humanity, and creation, they were never intended to be science lessons. In fact, reading these accounts literally has a way of obscuring their true meaning and power, making it impossible to integrate scientific and religious truth and forcing people to choose between science or the Bible. When faced with this choice, some people reject science entirely. When I first came to Cocoa Beach, I heard a sermon from a pastor in another church in Cocoa Beach who began by claiming that evolution was a conspiracy theory. Great way to start a sermon, right? He said that if we must choose between God's words and human words, we should always choose the Word of God. And so reading the stories literally caused him to reject the science behind evolutionary biology altogether. Conversely, when other people are given a choice, they choose science, dismissing the Bible as a collection of ancient fairy tales and walking away from faith. And I believe that this is so tragic because both choices presuppose a misinterpretation of the creation stories. When we read these stories in their historical context, we recognize that the communities who wrote them understood the world very differently than we do today. Like all ancient people, they did not have access to modern science. When attempting to explain the origins of the world, they did what everyone in their time did. They told stories. And their goal was not to provide what we would call a scientific account, but to assert that behind all existence is a creator, and that creation is a good and beautiful gift from God that we should cherish. The purpose of these stories is to transmit the wisdom of the ages, helping us to see that human beings are created by a loving God and bear that God's image. That life on this planet has meaning, purpose, and value. That it wasn't an accident. That God can help us with our loneliness, broken relationships, and temptation. That we can have a relationship with the Creator and be given a new way of life that will save us from the power of sin, evil, and death. The creation stories offer not scientific facts, but theological and existential insights. And one helpful way of thinking about this is to remember that while science seeks to explain how the world came to be and how the world operates at a material level, the Bible seeks to address the why. Why is there something instead of nothing? And what's the purpose and meaning behind it all from a spiritual and moral perspective? When we understand that science and religion are two distinct forms of writing with completely different purposes, the perceived conflict between science and religion disappears. In fact, from this perspective, as Emma sometimes reminds me, an increase in scientific knowledge can lead to an increase in one's faith. The harmony between science and faith is evident in the lives of many renowned scientists. Zorza Lemaitre, who proposed the Big Bang Theory, and I apologize if I'm butchering his French name, who proposed the Big Bang Theory, was a Catholic priest, as was Copernicus. Galileo saw his discoveries as compatible with his Christian faith. Johannes Kepler viewed science as a divine calling, and Robert Boyle, a pioneer in chemistry, saw his work as an expression of his Christian faith. Francis Bacon, a founder of the scientific method, and René Descartes, a philosopher, were deeply religious people, as were Blaise Pascal and Sir Isaac Newton. Even today, at least 51% of scientists who are part of the American Association for the Advancement of Science report believing in God or a higher power. So clearly, these examples show that modern science and faith do not have to be mutually exclusive. You're not forced to choose one and reject the other. Now, without delving too deeply into the details of scientific and theological debates, the origins of the universe generally come down to two fundamental perspectives. Some, including scientists like Stephen Hawking, believe in a self-creating universe governed by spontaneously generated natural laws. Others see the universe as an expression of the power, beauty, and will of a good and loving creator. And I'm here to tell you, friends, that whatever perspective you choose, both require faith. Mystery remains, even in science. While the vastness and beauty of the natural world inspires some people to believe in God, there are other reasons. My own Christian faith is grounded in personal experience. I believe in God because I have felt the presence of a higher power in my life, a presence that has profoundly transformed me from the inside out. Like many of you, I was raised in the church and taught the Bible. But when I got to college, my faith reached a crisis point. Everything I thought I believed was called into question, including the existence of God. At the same time, I was facing personal crises that often left me overwhelmed. And so even as I was wrestling with doubt, there were moments when all I could do was cry out to God for help. In those desperate times, I felt a mysterious but personal presence that offered me peace and comfort in a way that I cannot fully explain. As I prayed, I found the courage, strength, and hope to keep moving forward, even when I occasionally had fleeting thoughts of suicide. Seeking support, I began to attend a United Methodist church on Sunday mornings. There, I encountered the same love and acceptance that I had felt during my time of prayer. And this drew me back to the Bible, which I began to read with fresh eyes in the religion department at Florida Southern College. Many passages spoke to me, but it was the life and teachings of Jesus that changed everything. It was the life and teachings of Jesus that drew me back in and renewed meaning, value, and purpose in my life. I felt as though I were meeting Jesus again for the first time. Reflecting on his teachings about God, life, and human relationships seemed to illuminate everything, and it was the only thing that was making sense out of my chaotic life. Looking back, I know that I would not be the man that I am today without faith. In fact, I'm not sure I would be here at all. Faith has utterly transformed me. It has changed how I see myself and others, reshaping my words, thoughts, actions, and values. It has made me a better husband, a better father. It's made me a better human being. It has shifted me away from myself and toward helping and serving others, especially those who are poor, marginalized, or outcast. Faith has made me more forgiving, more generous, and more grateful. Indeed, faith saved me and gave me a life worth living. And because of this, if I were to die today and discover that there is no God and there is no afterlife, I would still choose to follow Jesus. Nothing would change. I also believe in God because I've seen faith transform others in profound ways too. I've seen people healed from brokenness, pain, and even trauma. I've seen people liberated from addictions, individuals struggling with anxiety and depression finding peace and joy, and those once consumed by self-interest becoming deeply concerned with serving others. And all of them attribute their transformation to God by saying, Jesus saved me. And it's not just people that I know personally. History is full of examples of people who, inspired by their love of God, experienced radical transformations that motivated them to make the world a better place. In one of my favorite books, titled Who Is This Man? By author John Ortberg, we see the profound and often overlooked influence of Jesus and his followers on human history. Because Jesus taught us to care about the vulnerable, Christians established the first charitable institutions, including hospitals, orphanages, and shelters. The very idea that hospitals should be a place of care for all people, regardless of status, originated with Christians. Jesus' treatment of women, children, and marginalized groups inspired movements for gender equality, the abolition of slavery, and the dignity of all people. Christians started the first hospitals offering free health care. They founded the first universities like Yale, Harvard, and Vanderbilt, all of which began as Christian seminaries. By dignifying labor, Christian teaching shaped the Protestant work ethic, profoundly influencing Western economic development. Christians also contributed immensely to art and science. Think of Michelangelo's David, Bach's music, or the work of scientists like Newton and Kepler that reflect a faith that viewed creation as rational and orderly. Christian principles underpinned the invention of democracy, emphasizing equality, the rule of law, and the separation of powers. In short, Christianity has provided billions of people with hope, purpose, and meaning, enabling transformative advancements in countless fields. Without Christianity, Western civilization as we know it would not exist. And notwithstanding the underside of this history, which also created immense suffering, Christianity's influence has made the world immeasurably better. As my grandma used to say, the proof is in the pudding. And when it comes to Western values, there is plenty of pudding. Now, of course, none of this proves the existence of God, nor does it prove the truth of Christianity. None of this completely eliminates doubt. However, the vastness and beauty of creation, the felt presence of God during times of crisis and suffering, the wisdom and transformative power of the teachings of Jesus, and the innumerable ways that belief in God has positively influenced human civilization, all of this gives me faith. It gives me the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. They give me confidence in the presence, power, and goodness of God, enabling me to trust God even when the doubts begin to creep in. What about you? If you have doubts, it's okay. God's not going to kick you out of the club. You don't need to deny your doubts or insist on absolute certainty, whether in faith or in science. Doubt is a natural part of the human experience. And if there is a God, he is surely big enough to handle your questions and uncertainties. Embrace the possibility that doubt can be a pathway to growth. Rather than weakening or destroying your faith, it can deepen and strengthen it, helping you to be more authentic and resilient. If you say, Mark, I don't believe in God, I would ask, Are you truly saying that you don't believe in God, or are you rejecting a specific understanding of God? For some, the God that they were taught as children no longer makes sense. Perhaps that God was portrayed as angry, punitive, and unrelenting, a deity who sits on a throne in heaven and throws lightning bolts at people who disobey and then condemn them to eternal hell. Such an image of God can be harmful, leaving people more burdened, anxious, or neurotic than they were before they heard the gospel. And if this resonates with you, it's okay to reject that God, or more accurately, to reject that way of thinking about God. But doing so doesn't mean that you have to close the door on the possibility of a different kind of God, one who may look very different than the image you were given and whom you have yet to meet. If you say, no, Mark, I'm not just rejecting a particular view of God, I truly believe that there is no God at all, I invite you to reflect on the reason why you believe this. Since we can no more prove that God doesn't exist than we can prove that God does exist, what leads you to be ideologically opposed to the existence of God? Take some time to consider it, and you might be surprised by what you discover. Now, if you're here this morning and for the most part you do believe in God, I also encourage you to reflect on why. Why do you believe in God? Does it make any difference in your life? Why do you follow Jesus? Where has God been at work in your life? You see, being a Christian means knowing your story and being willing to share it with others. I think that we've lost this in the Christian faith, and I think this is one reason why the church is declining and dying, because people are no longer comfortable sharing their testimony. That's a whole other topic, because if you grew up in a church that encouraged you to share your testimony by going up to random people on the side of the street, giving them a tract and trying to force them to convert so they don't go to hell, you might be a little opposed to sharing your testimony. But that's not what you're called to do. And we'll get to that in a moment. But part of being a follower of Jesus is knowing where God has been involved in your life through all the years you've been on this planet, and knowing it well enough so that when given the opportunity, you can share that with other people, invite them to come and see what God is doing in the life of our church in hopes that they might have a relationship with Jesus too. And if this has made a positive difference in your life, you're going to want to share it with other people. We talk more about the meal that we had at the restaurant down the street and how good it was than we talk about how good God is. We need to recover this. And the sad thing is that many people don't fully know their story. So when an opportunity arises to help others, they're unsure what to say. Friends, your role is not to prove the existence of God. You'll never prove that to someone who doesn't believe. Only God can change someone's heart by showing up in ways that are undeniable in their life. Your job is not to prove the existence of God, nor is it to prove that your beliefs are true or to convert people. You have one job, and that is simply to share what God has done in your life, trusting that God can use your story to encourage and even lead other people to faith in Jesus. To prepare, I want to give you some homework. I encourage you to create a timeline of significant highs and lows, like graduations, a marriage, the loss of a loved one, or a particularly difficult challenge, and reflect on where God was in those moments. If you've attended my starting point class, you've already done this. I'd encourage you to do it again. And after you develop this timeline, try to write out your story the best that you can remember it asking yourself, where was God in all of this? And then, this will help you to know your story well enough that when given the opportunity, you can share with others how God guided, strengthened, or transformed your life. Your story becomes a source of hope for others. Friends, we cannot prove the existence of God. We cannot prove that God doesn't exist. Both positions require a measure of faith due to the enduring mysteries of creation that we simply cannot comprehend. Mystery is inevitable, and it is normal to wrestle with doubt in the face of it. However, faith in God is not irrational, nor does it force a choice between religion and science. In fact, the most mature Christians that I know embrace doubt as a pathway to growth. They find ways to harmonize their faith with modern scientific discoveries, and they focus on living in a way that makes the world a better place. They focus on living in a way that points people to God, and by their actions invites them to believe in God, to have a relationship with Jesus. And this, my friends, is the incredible good news of the gospel this morning. Thanks be to God.
There at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of light. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars are made to worship so alive, I can see your heart in everything you've made.
Hey everyone, it's Pastor Mark, and I want to thank you for tuning in. I also want to thank First United Methodist Church of Cocoa Beach, which helps make this ministry possible. If you would like to make a donation to the church, go to our church website, fumccb.com. Also, if you're in town, I hope that you will visit one of our services in person so that we'll have an opportunity to meet. May God bless you as you find your next steps in following Jesus.